Ever since the sequel trilogy concluded, disappointed fans have been trying to nail down exactly where everything went so wrong. A not insignificant portion of Star Wars fans believe that with his decisions in Episode 8, Rian Johnson has ruined the entire franchise. But I'm going to lay out the argument that it was actually JJ Abrams and The Force Awakens that ruined maybe not the whole franchise, but at the very least ruined the sequel trilogy and the conclusion of the Skywalker saga. Hello everyone, Darth here, and welcome back to another overly analytical video essay. Try to forget for a moment how much you may personally hate Rian Johnson. Yes, he made a lot of mistakes completely on his own, but the fact is that several of the terrible plot points in Episode 8 came directly from what JJ Abrams established in Episode 7. Now, if there's a common reaction among Star Wars fans regarding The Force Awakens, it wasn't a great movie, but at least it created a good foundation for future films. Feel free to scroll through all these audience reviews. The majority are mediocre at best because the thing is, JJ's version of Episode 7 didn't create a strong foundation. It created an ambiguous, unstable foundation where the storyline was fractured with possibilities. JJ is known for works like Lost or Fringe or Cloverfield, where the audience is intentionally left in suspense with only part of a full story. Like this scene from the pilot episode of Lost, they're walking through a tropical island and are attacked by a polar bear. This cold climate animal being on a tropical island isn't explained until many episodes later, and that's what most of JJ's projects were about, creating stories that didn't initially make sense until they were explained much later on in the series. Super 8 didn't make sense until the end of the film.
It's been locked up for years. It's terrified and hungry and it just wants to go home.
Westworld is confusing twist after twist until the end of the season, which ends on a huge cliffhanger. Man, does JJ like his cliffhangers. I read that was actually the one thing the studio mandated he changed while filming Alias. They said he couldn't keep ending each episode with big cliffhangers, and I'm shocked that Disney let him end The Force Awakens on one. And the Cloverfield movies, anything confusing there? That storyline wasn't even partially explained until we'd had the third film in the series.
This experiment could unleash chaos.
Or look at this quote from Abrams himself, saying Alias had become incredibly confusing. And look at Fringe. This article describing Fringe says, "Nothing made any sense. While watching, I was a bit annoyed, but I don't think we were supposed to understand. Instead, we were meant to be confused." And this article that says, "The producers of Fringe promised a couple years ago that there was a meaning to the show that they hadn't fully shared with us, which we would understand when we saw the final episode." That show went 5 seasons, had 100 episodes, and JJ planned for us not to get full explanations until the final episode. Now yes, I acknowledge that for many of these projects, JJ may have only written the pilot and the first couple episodes, or he was just a producer, or he wasn't the only person creatively in charge. But think about it, nearly all of the projects he's been involved with have had the same exact themes of ambiguity and mystery. So based off of his previous works, we knew going in that JJ's storyline for Star Wars would be ambiguous and confusing, and it wouldn't be until late in the last film in the sequel trilogy when all of the pieces would finally come together. That's how JJ likes to write, and his plans for Star Wars were no different. The problem was this wasn't JJ's trilogy. He was never supposed to direct all 3 films, and the story group had no overarching storyline that each director had to loosely adhere to. They were each given leeway to do their own thing, which is an obvious problem when you give the first film to a director who specializes in maintaining storyline ambiguity until the very end. I mean, seriously, we've never had a Star Wars film end on a cliffhanger before. With this ending, JJ created all of the who are Rey's parents conspiracy theories, all of the who are Snoke conspiracy theories, all of the what was Luke doing on the island theories, the why is Snoke so disfigured theories, the who are the Knights of Ren theories. Actually, the way JJ wrote and then ended The Force Awakens was a perfect example of the Schrodinger's cat paradox. Luke could, at this point, be thought of as a Jedi Master and not a Jedi Master. And it's only in making the next movie will the character decide to be a Jedi and reach out and take the lightsaber, or decide not to be a Jedi and throw it away. Rey can at this point be considered to be both a well-written character with potential for an intricate backstory explaining her abilities, and as a poorly written Mary Sue who can do anything without training nor explanation. Kylo could at this point be considered to be at a turning point in his journey to the dark side, leading to huge character development in the next film where he is calmer, more centered, and has fully embraced the villain that he is, and is far more powerful in the dark side. Or he could be the same uncertain, lost, temperamental teenager that he is in The Force Awakens. At this point, film could be paralyzed for life, or have to wear a Vader-looking cyborg suit just to live, or he could be completely fine. The problem here is not how Rian Johnson dealt with the characters, the problem was how JJ created them. JJ treated Episode 7 like how he treated Lost or Fringe, like he had 90 more episodes to keep people guessing and to finally resolve cliffhangers and plot twists. But Star Wars has always been about self-contained films. No other film left us with so many unanswered questions.
Who was his father?
There was no father.
It is possible he was conceived by the midichlorians.
You refer to the prophecy of the one who will bring balance to the Force. You believe it's this boy?
Promise. Promise me you will train the boy.
Yes, Master.
Your apprentice, Skywalker, will be.
The other he spoke of is your twin sister.
Leia. Leia's my sister.
Whomever you're waiting for on Jakku, they're never coming back.
JJ Abrams was not the right person to put in charge of the continuation of a major film series. I mean, look at this interview about the Cloverfield paradox. JJ openly admits that as they were shooting the movie, a movie that was the third part of a series, they had no idea how to make the story tie together with the other films. A filmmaker is a storyteller first and foremost, and JJ Abrams seems to have completely lost sight of basic storytelling practices he used on great films like Armageddon, and instead he relies on suspense and mystery to keep people coming back for more. I mean, the dude did a 20-minute TED Talk about how much he loves mystery boxes in film.
Why so many mysteries? What is it about mystery that I seem to be drawn to? And I was thinking about this, what to talk about at TED.
But Star Wars has never been this type of film, where most of the plot intentionally doesn't make sense until you view the next two films. And this graphic I made only covers some of the many mysteries that JJ introduced. Why did Kylo venerate Vader?
A good question for another time.
What was the work Vader had started that Kylo wanted to finish?
A good question for another time.
Why did Maz have Luke's lightsaber? Does that mean she had his hand in a pickle jar somewhere too?
A good question.
Was Finn the only stormtrooper to ever go rogue?
A good question.
Why would someone trust Unkar Pluck to raise Rey?
A good question.
Is Maz actually a psycho stalker and that's why Chewie avoided her by staying on the ship?
What are you doing?
JJ does some amazing work, but his films and shows have almost always created more questions than they answered. The way he introduced characters and built the world they live in has fundamentally changed the genre Star Wars has always existed in. For these reasons I have laid out, I consider storyline ambiguity to be the second biggest mistake JJ Abrams made that ruined the future of all the sequels. Now, here is what I consider to be the single greatest failure JJ made with The Force Awakens that ruined the entire sequel trilogy. As many potential problems as the ambiguous storyline caused, those problems didn't impact the story nearly as much as the character and story development that took place off-screen between episodes 6 and 7. Nearly every issue that fans have with the sequel trilogy stems from having a lack of on-screen story and character development. Now, first off, let's get something straight. JJ Abrams ruined Luke Skywalker long before Rian Johnson did. Ben Solo turned evil, killed all of Luke's students, and Luke ran away. That was JJ's story. Luke didn't go confront Ben. He didn't go try to save Ben. He didn't go confront his other students that Ben took with him when he left. Luke didn't try to go save those other students. Luke didn't go and try to confront Snoke and save the galaxy from another Sith Lord Emperor. His students were slaughtered, his protege lost and confused and tempted by evil, and Luke decides to play Indiana Jones and go look for the ruins of the first Jedi Temple. JJ ruined Luke's character by having him disappear when the situation was most dire. That is not in his character. So Ryan was partially correct. The portrayal of Luke in The Last Jedi was 100% consistent with the already broken, cowardly version of Luke that JJ decided to give us. Anyways, back to the main point. Many people I've talked to would, albeit reluctantly, have accepted emotionally broken Hobo Luke if we had seen that character arc and followed him on his journey from hero to zero. The problem isn't actually that they quote-unquote ruined Luke Skywalker. The problem is we didn't see his fall from grace. So this is the Luke we remember.
Never. I'll never turn to the dark side. I am a Jedi, like my father before me.
While you're now saying this is who Luke actually is.
Will become, for the briefest moment of pure instinct, I thought I could stop it. Leave this island, now!
Stop! Stop!
This leads to cognitive dissonance for the audience because we now have two simultaneous versions of the same character, each with different beliefs, ideas, and values. This is why Mark Hamill himself was unable to think of the character as Luke Skywalker.
I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker. But
you cannot have major character development happen off-screen. When a main character goes through any important emotional or physical changes, we have to see it. There are actually many popular films that made this same mistake. The Dark Knight Rises and The Hunger Games Mockingjay are two more examples of how we end one film with our heroes being inspirational, suffering personal sacrifices, but forging heroically onwards despite the odds. Then the third movie begins, and the main characters are suddenly broken and sad and uninspiring, 100% the opposite of what we remember.
No, please don't. It's just fine. Or don't touch me. No, get off of me.
Batman was willing to be the bad guy, to have the cops chasing him, believing he was a murderer, sacrificing everything for Gotham. He went from being the one crucial thing the city needs to being made completely irrelevant by the Dent Act, all off screen.
1,000 inmates in Blackgate Prison as a direct result of the Dent Act.
He's also suddenly broken physically, when we had no hint in either prior movie that he wasn't in anything but tip-top physical condition. Similarly, in the third Hunger Games film, Katniss went from a determined, unstoppable, inspirational leader to being broken down, mopey, unhelpful, and uninspiring.
My name is Katniss Everdeen. My home is District 12. I was in the Hunger Games. I escaped. Peeta was left behind.
Yes, her hometown was destroyed. Many of her friends were killed, and Peeta was taken hostage, but obstacles never fazed this woman.
I volunteer as tribute.
So now, this sudden, broken-down version of Katniss seems confusing, and the audience suddenly has two versions of these characters in their head, each with seemingly different beliefs and ideas than the early versions of themselves. Look at Anakin as a comparison. Every single thing that drove him to the dark side, we saw it happen on screen.
You're a slave? I'm a person, and my name is Anakin. I will come back and free you, Mom. I promise.
Go. Young Skywalker is in pain. Terrible pain.
I will even learn to stop people from dying.
I wasn't strong enough to save you, Mom.
I love you.
You love me?
I'm not the Jedi I should be.
Annie, I'm pregnant.
You die in childbirth.
It was only a dream.
I won't let this one become real.
But we do not grant you the rank of master.
I want more, and I know I shouldn't.
More and more, I get the feeling that I'm being excluded from the Council.
You're asking me to do something against the Jedi Code. Against the Republic, against a mentor and a friend. That's what's out of place here.
He could even keep the ones he cared about from dying.
Is it possible to learn this power?
Not from a Jedi.
I found a way to save you. I won't lose you, Padme.
I'm not gonna die in childbirth, Annie. I promise you.
No, I promise you.
Learn to know the dark side of the Force, and you will be able to save your wife from certain death. Know the power of the dark side. Power to save Padme.
To cheat death is a power only one has achieved. But if we work together...
I need him! No! What have I done?
I will do whatever you ask. Just help me save Padme's life.
Show no mercy. Only then will you be strong enough with the dark side to save Padme. To save Padme.
I can't
to
live
save
without her.
Padme.
I can't live
To
without
save
her. I can't live without her.
Look at how much pain he is in. Look at how much effort Lucas went to show the transformation. If you are going to take someone pure and turn them into a fallen hero, you must show us the progression of his change.
I won't lose you the way I lost my mother, and I'm doing it for you, to protect you.
You turned her against me! You will not take her from me! You were the chosen one!
I'm a person, and my name is Anakin.
It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them!
Stay with me, Mom.
Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness!
I can't live without her.
Young Skywalker is in pain. Terrible pain.
I wasn't strong enough to save you, Mom.
To save Padme.
I won't lose you, Padme.
To save
I can't live without her.
Now, of course, I'm not trying to say that people don't change or that extreme character development shouldn't happen. I'm arguing that in most cases, we, the audience, have to see it. If we don't see them change, our brains have trouble making the connection that they are even the same character. And this problem isn't just restricted to the character of Luke going from epic hero to broken hermit. We also have the tragic tale of Ben Solo, star pupil of legendary Luke Skywalker, except there is no tragic story. We never knew Ben, so his fall to the dark side and all of the trauma we see him deal with in Episode 7 means nothing, because we didn't see who he used to be. George Lucas gave us 3 entire movies showing us the tragedy of Anakin Skywalker falling to the dark side. Since we never see Ben Solo, the noble young protege that was going to help Luke restore the Jedi Order to its former glory, all we have is Kylo Ren crying for some reason. JJ wanted this scene to tug at our heartstrings as we saw a son reaching out to his father desperate for help, but the only reason the scene works on any level is because of our nostalgia for Han and because of Adam Driver's magnificent performance.
Leave here with me. Come home. I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
We, the audience, never saw Han teaching a happy young Kylo to fly or shoot or play sabacc. Subconsciously, we don't care if Kylo comes back to the light side, because that goal represents a whole new character we've never seen before. That's why George Lucas knew it was absolutely essential to spend the prequels watching Anakin grow as a Jedi before he turned. As he is portrayed, Kylo Ren cannot be a tragic, fallen character, because we don't know exactly why he fell. What if he turned to the dark side because he was a moody teenager bored on a Tuesday night and got catfished into Force Skyping the wrong guy? What if he was being mind-controlled all this time? What if he turned to the dark side because he thought they really did have better cookies? If you want a character to be viewed as a tragic fallen hero, then we must see the hero's journey. Otherwise, we're left watching an inexplicably weepy, emotionally confused villain. The audience had no connection with the bond these two characters share. Just imagine if the sequel trilogy had ended with Ben Solo turning and killing most of the Jedi and Luke had become an emotionally broken hermit, and then Kylo Ren killed Han. We could have accepted that. We still likely would not have liked the decision to kill the Jedi Order again so quickly after just 3 movies, negating all of the work that Luke put in, but it would have made sense to us because we saw the fall happen slowly over the course of 3 films, just like we saw with Anakin. There is not a single compelling argument to make in favor of having any major plot points happen off-screen between films. And JJ didn't just have 1 or 2, he decided to have every single major plot point take place in between episodes 6 and 7 instead of on screen in episode 7. Now, of course, change happens naturally between films all the time, but almost never are these changes major plot points. Characters will get married, have kids, get new jobs, but rarely will any true character development happen off-screen. Is it any wonder that fans are having difficulty going from this to this?
If you see our son, bring him home.
When we didn't see any of this. Let's quickly compare what happens between the other 6 films. Between episodes 1 and 2, Anakin grew up and became a Jedi prodigy. Padme became a senator. Obi-Wan became a wise and respected Jedi Knight. The Separatist movement begins under Count Dooku. Palpatine gains influence as a chancellor. Between episodes 2 and 3, the Clone Wars have been raging for 3 years. Grievous infiltrated Coruscant and kidnapped Chancellor Palpatine. The Jedi have changed from peacekeepers to army generals. Anakin became a renowned Jedi Knight. Padme got pregnant, and Obi-Wan became a renowned Jedi Master. Between episodes 3 and 4, Luke and Leia grew up. Leia became a member of the Senate and a leader in the rebellion. The rebellion gained power and influence. The Death Star was completed. The plans for the Death Star were stolen and delivered to Leia. Between episodes 4 and 5, Luke and Han are promoted within the Rebel Alliance. Luke's Jedi training has progressed and he shows new abilities. Luke, Han, and Leia have grown closer as friends, and the Rebels had to abandon their base and move to Hoth. Between episodes 5 and 6, Luke builds a new lightsaber and completes his Jedi training. They find where Han is and infiltrate Jabba's palace. The Rebels obtain the plans for the new Death Star along with the shuttle Tydirium, and the Emperor finds out about the Rebels' attack. And finally, between episodes 6 and 7... They dismantled or chased away the rest of the Imperial fleet. They helped establish the New Republic. Han and Leia got married. Han and Leia had a kid. A second empire rises to power. The First Order begins stealing thousands of kids to sell as slave soldiers. The First Order begins building massive super weapons such as Starkiller Base, Snoke's ship, and the Dreadnought. Leia leaves the New Republic and forms the Resistance. The Resistance grows to become a well-known galaxy-wide symbol of hope. Luke forms a new Jedi Order and begins training students. Ben Solo gets old enough to show he's Force sensitive and he begins Jedi training with Luke. A new powerful Sith rises to power from nowhere, even though we know there's never been more than 2. Snoke takes over as Supreme Leader of the First Order. Snoke begins tempting Ben Solo. Ben begins swaying other students to the dark side with him. Whatever the Knights of Ren are established. Ben Solo subdues Luke, then kills most of his classmates and burns down the new Jedi Temple. Luke disappears into exile. Han and Leia break up. Han and Chewie go back to smuggling. Han and Chewie lose the Millennium Falcon. The First Order now has a fully established military. The Force ghosts of Yoda, Anakin, and Obi-Wan have disappeared. Lando and Mon Mothma have disappeared. At least 3 new Force powers are discovered. Now, I know I'm generalizing a good bit, but does everyone see the problem here? In the previous films, almost the only important things that happen off-screen are improvements. People growing older, or getting stronger, or gaining new skills, or getting promotions, or getting pregnant. These are all steps forward that we can come back into the next film glad to see because they move the story along in a positive direction emotionally. Now, in between episodes 6 and 7, not only do we see every major character regress dramatically, we also see for the first time ever major storyline aspects have happened off-screen. This is very poor storytelling. Yes, there are always exceptions, but most of the time for an audience to be able to accept a character changing, they have to see the change occurring over time in a natural way or they can't identify with the character anymore. What if Rowling announced another Harry Potter book, and in it Harry has given up magic and exiled himself after Ron and Hermione's son went evil and joined a Voldemort-worshipping cult run by the old Death Eaters who are somehow more powerful than ever? How did all of that happen? It would have been jarring. It would have made no sense to the audience. What if they announced a Lord of the Rings sequel where Aragorn was suddenly no longer king and had reverted back to a broken hermit, and there was another one ring to rule them all, except it was twice as dangerous as the last one, and some different hobbits had to travel to New Mordor and throw it into an even bigger volcano? That would have made no sense. Not just because it's basically the same story repeated over again solely for nostalgia's sake, but it also doesn't make sense because you can't revert every single story arc off screen and have it not feel confusing to the audience. As a final example, let's compare a film similar in concept, The Matrix. We have a chosen one who is found by 2 wise leaders who train him to use his powers, and the first film, or films, is all about him learning to harness his abilities, and everyone anticipated in the next film we'd really see them come into their powers. Now, let's imagine if the Episode 8 storyline happened with The Matrix 2. In between the first and second Matrix, Neo failed and most of his friends were killed, and he disappears off into the Matrix, exiling himself in disgrace. The movie is all about Trinity searching for Neo, and when she finally finds him in the last minute of the film, he's a broken down remnant who's disconnected himself from his chosen one abilities. Remember when Neo looked like this? And after 32 years, they finally make a sequel, and now he's suddenly like this?
My hope
If the story of The Matrix had gone in this direction, fans would have hated it just as many Star Wars fans hated Luke in The Last Jedi. And the ironic thing is, it isn't necessarily the character changing that fans hated, it's the fact that the change happened off screen so we never saw the transition, and thus can't identify with the new character. This is how JJ Abrams single-handedly destroyed all 3 sequels. We needed to see these things happen on screen for the story to feel natural and make sense. I am not a fan of any aspect of the storyline that Rian Johnson decided to go with, but the only reason he had so much leeway to do what he did was because JJ Abrams created an ambiguous, fluctuating storyline that had every single major plot point happen off-screen, leaving us as an audience confused and disconnected from every bit of character development regarding the established heroes. I expect film schools will be tearing apart The Last Jedi for years to come as an example of what an incohesive, poorly written script looks like. But the harsh fact is the downfall of the Star Wars franchise began here, with JJ completely failing as a storyteller. In a Q&A with co-writers JJ Abrams, Michael Arndt, and Lawrence Kasdan, Arndt admitted that Luke wasn't in the film because they couldn't figure out how to have him in a scene without upstaging everyone. He said, "It just felt like every time Luke came in and entered the movie, he just took it over. Suddenly, you didn't care about your main character anymore because, oh, Luke Skywalker's here. I want to see what he's going to do." I know this wasn't your quote, Mr. Abrams, but you were in charge of this film. If you can't introduce new characters and have us care about them, they are not well-written characters, and you failed as a writer. It's very normal for a competent writer to introduce new characters who are in nearly every scene as an established favorite and yet are not overshadowed. I mean, Mara Jade is basically introduced side by side with Luke throughout the Thrawn trilogy, and she's a huge fan favorite. That series also introduced Thrawn and Sabaoth, who also became fan favorites, despite also having Luke and Leia and Han in the story. And Thanos is one of the greatest villains we've ever seen. We only had one film that really established his character. And notice how he's able to be in a scene with Loki without totally being overshadowed? And notice they didn't set Robert Downey Jr. or Chris off to the side so they could focus on the new guys? And how they managed to introduce a dozen new characters next to the old ones and still even have the minor characters stand out?
Don't say it. Don't you say it.
Left.
Come on! You should be ashamed of yourself. You should take another lap. Did you just take it? I assume you just took it.
The Force Awakens was badly written, its storyline was fractured and incomplete, its characters were underdeveloped, and it set a terrible precedent for what the future of the Star Wars franchise would be. Now, despite my harsh words, I obviously don't believe the franchise is beyond saving. If I did, then I still wouldn't be a fan. However, I do believe the sequel trilogy is beyond saving. Episode 8 not only didn't fill in any plot holes, but it created a nearly unprecedented number of new ones. Episode 9 won't be able to retroactively fill in enough of these plot holes to make this sequel trilogy feel like a uniform story that naturally continues our hero's journey after Return of the Jedi. The future of the franchise will be in how Disney approaches the next film after Episode 9. I wouldn't be surprised to see them start from scratch and count Episodes 1 through 9 as the Skywalker saga, which Rey will likely be revealed to be a part of. Then they'll start over again with Episode 1, following a new Jedi and what will be dubbed a fresh new beginning for the Star Wars franchise. And if they can give us a cohesive storyline that's not packed with open-ended, mysterious possibilities, and give us character development we can actually follow on screen, then maybe the next part of the franchise will have a shot. Granted, that'll put us right back to where we were in 1977, with brand new characters the audience has to grow to love.
Hello there.
But if Disney puts the right directors in charge this time and puts the story group 100% in charge of all major plot points, then at least the franchise will have the chance to start over. At least once again, the franchise will have a new hope. In the last video, I went over in detail the main 2 ways that I believe JJ Abrams' chosen storyline ruined the entire sequel trilogy, because the storyline was too ambiguous and because nearly every major plot point happened off-screen. Now, if you really delve into the story of The Force Awakens, those 2 problems are only the tip of the iceberg. Let's look at 10 other major decisions that JJ Abrams made that quite possibly ruined the entire sequel trilogy. Number 1, the Force is redefined too drastically and too quickly. There are 3 brand new Force powers displayed in The Force Awakens. Force time freeze, where anything or anyone Kylo chooses will be frozen in place and unable to move, Force sleepy time, where he can make pretty girls fall unconscious in his arms, and Force mind reading, which is not the same mind reading as is depicted in earlier films. Leia knew Luke needed help, but couldn't read his mind to know exactly how. Vader knew Luke had a sister, but didn't know it was Leia. While in The Force Awakens, this level of mind reading is very specific.
It's in a droid, a BB unit.
You're afraid that you will never be as strong as Darth Vader.
Now, this level of development of Force powers creates a huge problem. There's little room for growth in future films. It is extremely rare that a student can use a technique their master could not. Therefore, anything Kylo can do, Luke can do better. And since Kylo was about 17 when he turned, he's still a very young Padawan. By comparison, Obi-Wan was 25 when he defeated Maul, and Anakin was 20 when he took on Dooku, who was one of the best lightsaber duelists of all time. And both these guys were constantly called
Young Padawan, my young apprentice.
My young Padawan learner, young one.
My young apprentice.
My better young apprentice.
Young Luke. A young Jedi.
Young Skywalker, young one.
Oh, young, my young apprentice.
So, logically, Kylo wasn't even close to being fully trained, meaning Luke could likely do very complicated things with the Force that Kylo wasn't even close to being able to do, which would also logically tempt Kylo into turning to the dark side for more power, because his master was so much more powerful, which made Kylo jealous. So by JJ deciding to give Kylo Force powers that are 25% cooler than anything we've seen Jedi use before, it mandates Kylo's master, who is twice as experienced, also be twice as powerful. This is the only way that the balance in their experience levels makes sense. And then JJ would have had to factor in character growth over the next 3 films, where the characters would see their powers grow. So if in each episode we see their powers with the Force double, and if Kylo in Episode 7 can do this, then in Episode 8, Kylo would need to have his Force powers grow to be consistent with what we've seen in the previous 6 films. And by the 3rd film, Anakin had grown so strong he was nearly unstoppable, even by fully fledged Jedi and Sith. So now Kylo advances to that stage in Episode 9, which means Luke must remain ahead of him by double because he started ahead by double. The way JJ approached the Force was extremely problematic because it creates an exponential growth curve that's completely unsustainable. Dragon Ball Z actually ran into the same problem with power levels when they introduced Frieza.
Vegeta, what does the scouter say about his power level? It's over 9,000! What, 9,000? There's no way that can be right!
Interesting. Your power shot up to 42,000. That's no small feat. Can you guess my power level? 530,000.
By the way, Vegeta, did I happen to mention that my fighting power in this form is over 1 million? What? No way! Huh?
1 million?
They went from a power level of 9,000 being shocking and impressive to having very quickly to measure in the millions, and currently in Dragon Ball Super, they're having to measure power levels in the trillions. Another example is at the end of The Magicians. While Quentin is recovering, he spends months at the Centaur Sanctuary and achieves god-level powers. Alice was stronger than anyone by far, taking on the beast completely by herself. And then Quentin figured out how to do her extremely complicated capturing the atoms senior project, whatever, which she could never figure out, making him now even more advanced than she was. And then he finished his senior project and flew to the moon and back. Then he reverse engineered all of Mayakovsky's super advanced genius spells that took him decades to master. Quentin literally learned how to bring things back to life. How is there any threat of people around him dying now? And yet in the next book, all of that is gone. Because it had to go. There was no room for growth with Quentin being that powerful. Power scaling is an extremely complex part of character development, and based off of what we see is basically still a Padawan is capable of doing, we know his master Luke would have been even more amazing. If Kylo can stop one laser bolt, Luke, with 30 years more experience, could have stopped dozens, if not hundreds. If Kylo can read someone's mind this accurately, Luke could probably get inside their mind and control their body like a puppet. If Kylo can freeze one person, Luke could freeze a whole squadron. If Kylo could effortlessly make one person fall unconscious, how many people could Luke knock out at once? Many people say they like Hermit Luke being broken and not being overpowered like the Jedi Master many fans wanted to see, because he would have defeated everyone so easily it wouldn't have been entertaining, but the only reason he would have been overpowered is because of how already overpowered Padawan Kylo was written to be. If you diminish Kylo's Force capabilities, you can diminish Luke's as well. Additionally, the examples of the Force we see in Episode 7 are way more powerful than anything we see in Episodes 1 through 6. The Force is used for jumping higher, speeding up your reflexes, anticipating the future, physically moving objects, but the ability to control people's mind and body in the fashion that Kylo does shows a complete redefinition of how powerful a Force user can be. Which leads us to number 2. The Force is used as a plot device and doesn't make sense. JJ Abrams constantly used or chose not to use the Force whenever the plot required it. Point A. The Force was a plot device because Kylo conveniently forgets that he can use the Force. Why could he sense and stop this laser bolt, yet not this one? And Rey, fine, yes, he's toying with her here, I get that. But here, Rey absolutely beats him, and it's obvious he thinks he's about to die, so why didn't he... Look at how fast this happens. Kylo naturally gravitates towards this freeze attack without conscious thought. There is zero reason for Rey to have beaten him in this fight, not because of her inexperience with a lightsaber, but because Kylo has shown to have complete control of his enemy's mind via the Force. So the only reason the Force wasn't used in this fight, while it was used in these other fights, was because it was a plot device JJ was using or not using, depending on whether the situation called for Kylo to win or to lose. Kylo killed the old man instead of reading his mind. Why does Kylo kill the man who had the map? The man who Kylo knows has a personal connection with Luke and likely knows where he is. Maybe he doesn't even need a map to find him. Why does he kill him and then take Poe, a man who only might have a copy of the map? And why doesn't Kylo read Poe's mind right then and there? Does he need to have people tied up on his special mind rape torture thing to read their minds? If he had read the old man's mind, or read Poe's mind, right then and there, on the planet, at worst, they would have instantly found the droid with the map in it. At best, Kylo would have instantly known where Luke was without even needing a map.
I see it. I see the island.
Force mind reading is a plot device because it's never used when it would actually be the most useful. Point B. The Force was a plot device used to suddenly thrust Rey into the mystical world of the Jedi. What was the purpose of having Force visions? Earlier films show Anakin and Luke having visions which turn out to be traps, establishing the plot point that the future is always in motion and that you can't fully trust visions. These visions Rey had serve no purpose for character development nor for plot development. They are confusing, disjointed, and they don't advance the story or help Rey's character progress in any way. She never mentions them again, never asks anyone to help interpret them, never tries to discover if they had any deeper meaning. And why does she only see the visions one time? Why not every time she touches the saber? Maz says,
"That lightsaber was Luke's and his father's before him, and now it calls to you."
What does this mean? Is the lightsaber just calling out to any nearby Force user? Why didn't it call out to Kylo? He was on the planet too. And does this lightsaber suddenly have its own personality? There's a huge difference in the Force leading her to the lightsaber and the lightsaber itself drawing Rey in. Disney recently cemented this idea themselves. They just made this canon a helmet from an ancient Sith who embodied his spirit into the helmet, and anyone who puts on the helmet is now controlled by his spirit. So by Disney's own storyline, it may not have been the Force calling her. This lightsaber may literally be embodied by a Force ghost of a dead Jedi or Sith. And that lightsaber was used to slaughter thousands of people in Episode 3. How could it not be imbued by the dark side? Is it really calling her as a trap? JJ decided to have the lightsaber call to Rey and give her visions because he needed a mystical, magical way of thrusting Rey into the supernatural world of the Jedi. This use of the Force makes no sense within the context of the other films, and makes even less sense when compared with Disney's overall strategy, making this entire scene nothing more than a plot device for Rey to discover the lightsaber and her latent Force powers. Point C. The Force was a plot device because Rey didn't realize she had it until the plot required her to have it. The lightsaber calling to her and the Force visions freaked her out badly. Judging by her reaction, she never had the Force speak to her before in any way. Never in Star Wars history has a Jedi or Sith's connection to the Force been dormant, waiting to be awakened. And the first time she consciously uses the Force, she has no idea that Force persuasion is a thing. Luke only knew about Force persuasion because he saw Ben do it firsthand.
I must be allowed to speak.
Jedi mode speak go eat.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
And again, in this scene, Rey has no idea that Jedi can Force pull. I mean, look at her face and how confused she is. This scene only works because the audience knows that Jedi do this all the time. And Luke didn't inherently know how to do this. He struggled to reach the saber physically first, and then out of desperation attempted to use the Force to pull the saber to him. I can only find 2 examples of Rey using the Force in a way that even partially makes sense canonically. After they escape from Jakku, Finn asks,
"How did you do that?"
I don't know.
Now, yes, this is exactly the same as Anakin in that they're both good pilots because
he can see things before they happen. That's why he appears to have such quick reflexes. It's a Jedi trait.
But this scene also doesn't make sense because Anakin is never shocked at his abilities. He uses the Force naturally all the time. He's never surprised that
I'm the only human who can do it.
Anakin isn't shocked he can fly a ship he's never been in before. But this appears to be the very first time that Rey has done something and not known how she did it. Resisting Kylo's mind reading actually makes sense as well. She doesn't consciously know what she's doing. She's using the Force at an untrained, instinctual level. But then you get to here, and suddenly she's using the Force with intent and with an understanding of what she can do with it. Now, the official explanation is that when Kylo was probing her mind, she accidentally downloaded all of his Jedi training, which is why
She's just beginning to test her powers. The longer it takes to find her, the more dangerous she becomes.
How did this idea ever get past the drawing board? This isn't the Matrix, you can't just download experience.
I know how to use the Force, how to fight with lightsabers, how to use Force pull and Force persuasion. I'm basically a Jedi now.
And even if the writers decided to make it technically possible, it's a terrible plot device that flies directly in the face of Jedi and Sith lore and basic common sense. There's no need for failure as you learn and make mistakes. Why not just download the knowledge of your teacher and then graduate? Actually, I should have made this a bigger point. JJ making knowledge of the Force downloadable information completely redefined the entire future of the Jedi and Sith orders. There is now no need for training, for apprenticeships, for Padawans. There will never be anyone more or less powerful. A master would have no need to teach, and a first-day student would know as much as 900-year-old Yoda. This was an absurd, utterly short-sighted plot point that JJ introduced that significantly alters the entire established growth arc of Force users. Anyways, back to point C. The Force was a plot device because nearly every use of the Force by Rey in this film makes no sense and is nothing more than a way to move her from point A to point B. Considering how powerful JJ made her, she should have been like Anakin, using the Force naturally her whole life, but every time she encountered it, the Force terrified and confused her, and the only reason she used the Force when and how she did was because the Force was a plot device inserted at random when the story required its use. Point D, the Force was a plot device because it ignored Leia. There were multiple scenes in the original trilogy that set up Leia to be someone who was Force sensitive, who would one day learn to use the Force just like her brother.
You have that power too. In time, you'll learn to use it as I have.
And yet 30 years have now passed, and the only example of her being Force sensitive that we see is her knowing when Han dies. Which is also super ambiguous if that's actually what happened. I actually think they just had their comms active and she heard Han die, just like everyone else in the room heard Han die. That's the only reason those techs in the background all turned around at the same time to look at her. Leia didn't make any sound or anything, yet they all turned to look at her in concern. The only conclusion I can see is they must have heard Han die over either his or Finn's active comm. Leia needed part of her character development to be acknowledging her growth using the Force, and it needs to be more than just this one possible but entirely ambiguous scene, or in any future films, her using the Force will just look like a plot device and not part of an intentional character trait. And I know we're not discussing Episode 8 in this video, but what I just described is exactly what happened. Leia displayed no use of the Force, neither before nor after her Mary Poppins scene. Aside from many people hating this scene because it was just another useless gotcha twist, this scene inherently doesn't make sense to viewers because both directors completely failed in showing Leia's character development as a Force user, as the original trilogy clearly proved she was. This scene not working was actually JJ's fault. If he had established Leia as a powerful Jedi in Episode 7, then this scene would have worked. But since JJ completely ignored her pre-established character arc that set her up to become a Jedi as well, this scene is only confusing. Number 3. JJ Abrams ruined every previous legacy and accomplishment. Before the opening crawl had even ended, The Force Awakens had destroyed nearly everything our heroes had accomplished in the original trilogy. We went from Return of the Jedi to the Jedi having been immediately wiped out again. The Jedi Order stood for over 6,000 years, but Luke's new Jedi Order didn't even stand for 30 years, making not only Luke himself, but everyone he trained look weak and ineffective. The Republic stood for 1,000 years. The New Republic that Leia, Han, and Luke fought so hard for only managed to stand for 30 years. How were there 1,000 years of peace, and now within 30 years a new empire is formed right under their noses? This demeans their entire struggle for democracy, making it look weak and ineffective, and making the people who founded the New Republic, especially Leia and Mon Mothma, look weak and incompetent. We went from a 6-movie uphill battle to defeat a single Sith Lord, to having a new, even more powerful Sith appear from nowhere. In the past 1,000 years, no Sith had felt powerful enough to reveal themselves and take on the full Jedi Order, until Darth Sidious.
My only conclusion can be that it was a Sith Lord.
Impossible. The Sith have been extinct for a millennium.
I do not believe the Sith could have returned without us knowing.
Disguised as Sheev Palpatine, it took him a lifetime of brilliant political maneuvering and extremely subtle planned subterfuge to bring down both the Republic and the Jedi Order in a single blow. He's literally a once-in-a-millennia kind of guy. Oh, wait, someone else pops up 15 years later that also destroys the Republic and the Jedi Order. So I guess Palpatine wasn't that special after all. Introducing Snoke and having him be just as successful immediately diminishes everything that Sidious ever achieved. Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one, fulfilling an ancient prophecy, a Force user more powerful than anyone in 1,000 years. Now Rey can do this after literally 2 days of even knowing that the Force exists? She learned in days what it took Anakin decades to learn. Her character completely undermines Anakin and the concept of the Chosen One. In the back of our minds, the entire sequel trilogy will always feel in some way depressing, and it's because JJ Abrams made the story undermine every achievement made in the previous films. Look at this timeline I made. There is such a long build-up before the Empire actually comes to fruition, before the Jedi Order actually has its fall. And then rebuilding the Jedi Order is just a blip on the map. And the fall of the Empire is just a similar blip on the map. They're both completely irrelevant when you look at the longer timeline. Number 4. JJ ruined the sequels when he broke up the band. Episodes 4 through 6 were all about Luke and Han and Leia. Other characters were interesting, but it was these 3 that the audience loved and focused on the most. The decision to break the group up and have their friendship fractured was an enormous mistake. Because JJ decided to have Luke disappear after Kylo turned, we never got to see the reunion of grown-up Leia, Han, and Luke on screen. We weren't waiting to see more ships or space battles or even new lightsabers.
That is blasphemous!
What we wanted to see from the sequel trilogy were sequels. The same characters working to conclude the same storyline while introducing new characters and story along the way that the next saga would focus on. We were waiting for this. How sad does that make you fellow fans feel? To know that this Photoshop scene I made is the only time you're ever going to see these three characters reunited after they grow up. And JJ, not Ryan, denied us that opportunity. And even more importantly, we didn't just need to see these characters on screen again, we needed to see our heroes.
You're Han Solo!
I used to be.
Star Wars has always been a story of growth and perseverance and hope, but instead JJ showed us broken down versions of heroes who have lost their way. The last time we saw them, they were joyful and optimistic. The galaxy was in full rebellion against the Empire, which had had its head cut off, but was still for the most part a formidable military force that still dwarfed the Rebel Alliance. Our heroes would have struggled for years to subdue the remains of the Empire and to fully establish the New Republic. It's fine for them to look older, but that doesn't mean they have to be rough and unkempt. There is nothing, and I mean nothing familiar in the portrayal of these characters. Han was a man who was tough as nails but deeply caring and loving, but look what JJ did to him. All you see in Han is pain. All we see is the shell of the man he used to be. He may have dressed the same, but Han Solo seems to have died when Ben turned evil.
This is a Millennium Falcon. You're Han Solo!
I used to be.
Additionally, the entire original trilogy had a subplot of Han and Leia falling in love. And now the next movie begins and they've broken up off screen. Yes, Luke and Han would both have been devastated when Ben turned, but neither man would ever have turned and ran away from the problem. And even though Luke never said a word, there was nothing there that was inspiring at all, and we just spent an entire movie trying to find him. The only reason this scene works on any level is because fans found it inspirational to see Luke Skywalker again. The only reason this scene works is because JJ is saying, hey guys, remember how amazing he used to be? While at the same time, JJ is also saying, hey, please forget that this used to be a guy who never abandoned his friends and would risk his life in a heartbeat for them. That's not who this guy is anymore. JJ dressed these guys in old weathered clothes and gave them uncut greasy hair and tried to pass them off as the same characters, and then wondered why fans gave a lackluster response. And Leia, I actually only had one issue with her character arc, which I'll discuss later. For the most part, her character is consistent. The Republic won't help, so she forms a resistance and becomes a military commander. I guess maybe JJ was going with the theme of women can face tough times and survive while men are crushed by adversity? Now, don't get me wrong, I don't expect our heroes to have stayed young and awesome forever. The main characters of Star Wars were always going to change, as Luke and Leia had kids and the story shifted to them. But that was going to happen naturally as the story progressed. JJ didn't have to immediately cut out Luke so they could make room for the next generation. JJ made a critical error in cutting the old heroes from the story too early by completely severing the love interest that was one of the pivotal subplots of the original trilogy, and by making the main heroes be mere shadows of what they might have been. Number 5, JJ decided to redefine lightspeed. Before hyperspace ramming became a problem, JJ was creating problems of his own that he rarely gets credit for. We have the Falcon go to lightspeed from inside a hangar, which disintegrates the beastie in front of it, but only knocks over the guys standing right behind the engines.
We're going out of here at light speed.
From inside the hangar, is that even possible?
I never asked that question until after I've done it.
We've never seen any ship jump to lightspeed from within a hangar, and there's probably a good reason for that.
Yeah, there is.
Then we have the Resistance fighters apparently chilling in hyperspace, just waiting for a signal to attack Starkiller Base.
Black leader, go to sublights on your phone.
Roger, base. Dropping on light speed.
Hyperspace has never worked like that before. Then we have Han coming out of lightspeed, somehow knowing exactly when to time it, so they come out between the force field and the planet. By doing that, while using only normal human judgment and reaction time, JJ set the precedent that no shields are effective anymore in the Star Wars universe because you can just hyperspace through them. And just to reiterate how little this scene makes sense, Han is making a landing on Starkiller Base at light speed. This is physically impossible, at least given how they filmed the scene. When they come out of lightspeed, they are traveling at just over 186,000 miles per second. Not to mention the fact that Han just seems to guess based on his gut when to come out of lightspeed. If his ship's computer was calculating and driving, fine, it would definitely be able to pull the stunt off if it somehow had the exact location and topographical information about the planet, After all, it would have to land them close enough to the actual base instead of on the other side of the planet, and it'd have to calculate an area wide and flat enough for them to have time to slow down and land. Because Starkiller Base is 660 kilometers or 410 miles in circumference, which means in the 5 seconds after coming out of light speed, before they even started trying to dodge the mountain in the film, they would have already traveled 930,000 miles and have circumvented the entire planet 2,268 times. Now, yeah, I know this isn't Star Trek, we shouldn't look too closely at the science, but the thing is, JJ did try to look at the science. Normally the Falcon comes in for a nice gentle landing, but JJ knew that coming out of light speed it had to be moving really fast, which is why he showed Han having such a difficult time slowing it down. So JJ knew enough to know the Falcon should be landing faster than normal, but he didn't take the extra effort to figure out how fast and how far it would actually travel. This same scene would have been so easy to do correctly. Instead of Han blindly guessing, have the ship calculate when to exit hyperspace, then throw all the power to the forward shields so they can crash land at 930,000 miles per hour without the ship tearing apart.
Angle the shields. Hang on back there!
This scene could have easily made sense if JJ had just put more thought into explaining it. Yes, Ryan introduced a huge plot hole with hyperspace ramming. Why not put a shield like the Raddus had? Apparently it had a new prototype force field that actually did all the damage when it hit light speed. It wasn't the actual ship that destroyed everything. Anyways, why not put one of those on an asteroid and then shoot that asteroid through enemy ships or Death Stars or planets or whatever? Yes, Ryan changed the entire course of Star Wars space battles with hyperspace ramming, but JJ did it first. If they can get around enemy shields by dropping out of light speed just behind the shield, why not put a hyperdrive on their missiles and program them to drop out of hyperspace just behind the enemy shield? The instant that JJ decided this was possible, shields no longer work in the Star Wars universe. Then JJ also redefined how one enters hyperspace. It's always been a calculated thing, something they had to plan and stall in order to calculate a safe trajectory.
Traveling through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. Without precise calculations, we'd fly right through a star or bounce too close to a supernova and then it'd end your trip real quick, wouldn't it?
Budget, I haven't completed my calculations. I'll make them for you.
But it seems every ship in The Force Awakens just jumps to hyperspace without the need to calculate. Combine the speed of being able to enter hyperspace at a moment's notice with the ability to exit hyperspace behind the enemy shields, and like I said earlier, space combat has completely changed. JJ redefining lightspeed in these ways has major implications for the rest of the franchise. Number 6. JJ redefines old age. Maz Kanata is older than Yoda, and not just by a little bit.
When 900 years old you reach...
She's run this watering hole for 1,000 years.
So, logically, she didn't build this place as a baby. So, let's say she worked half her life before she either built or took over ruling this place. So we could assume her age to be, what, a conservative 1,500 years old? She could even be double that age. It's never been defined anywhere that I can find. So what are the implications of her having such an advanced age? The First Order and the Resistance both knew about her. So, logically, with her ruling this place for the past 1,000 years, both the Empire and the Rebels knew about her as well. Why did the Emperor and Vader choose to allow such a powerful, Force-sensitive, obviously influential being to live? And this stronghold of Maz's has been around so long, she had to have interacted with many Jedi, maybe even Sith over the past 1,500 plus years. Look, she lists these things chronologically.
Through the ages, I've seen evil take many forms. The Sith, the Empire. Today, it is the First Order.
She listed those chronologically while saying, I have seen evil take many forms. This means she personally saw the Sith from the Old Republic in the time of the Jedi and Sith Wars before the Rule of Two was even invented. For Luke and now Rey, who both know next to nothing about the Jedi, once we find out about her age, Maz is an absolutely invaluable resource for them learning about the Jedi. I mean, Maz obviously knows the Force intimately. Why would Rey ever try to track down Luke instead of getting training from Maz? I mean, Maz would have literally given Rey the exact same training that Luke did.
It moves through and surrounds every living thing.
It's the energy between all things, the tension, the balance that binds the universe together.
Close your eyes. Feel it.
Breathe.
The light. It's always been
Reach
there.
out with your feelings.
It will guide you.
By creating her character the way he did, JJ introduced a far more complex situation than I believe he ever intended for this character to play a role in. Number 7. JJ ruined The Force Awakens because the entire end goal of the story was concluded unsatisfactorily. In the initial script, Luke was supposed to be meditating, using the Force to levitate rocks just as he did while training with Yoda, so we could see his progression with the Force, and so that after an entire movie talking about him, the audience is rewarded for their wait. We've got 2 hours invested waiting for this exact moment. What is Luke going to be doing? What will he look like? Is he going to be worth the wait? We watched hundreds of people die as the First Order searched for Luke. If this next moment isn't amazing, it negates all of the effort put in to find him. It negates the sacrifice of every death. The audience has all of this struggle, all of these deaths that have built up to this one moment. Now I ask you, is this worth this? Now, many of you are probably screaming, yes, it was worth it. Seeing Luke again was awesome. But that's exactly my point. You were so desperate to see him on screen again that you're happy to get even 60 silent seconds of him standing there not doing anything. If you're a new fan, like Disney was trying to cater to, if you haven't been waiting since 1983 to see Luke Skywalker on screen again, this scene meant nothing to you. He's only awesome because of nostalgia. Add in the fact that a day ago, Rey had no idea that Luke was anything more than a myth.
I thought he was a myth.
And from both hers and the audience's point of view, this scene doesn't even begin to feel like a satisfactory conclusion. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. She should need to ask, hey, are you Luke Skywalker? Unless he's floating around like a magic space wizard, she'd have no way of knowing that's actually him and not some random island local hobo.
Master Skywalker, Master Skywalker, Master Skywalker, Master Skywalker, Master Skywalker, Master Skywalker, Master Skywalker.
Have him training with either the Force or a lightsaber with such a display of power that Rey instantly knows it's him, and so the 2-hour-long build-up to seeing that character is justified for the audience. I know this is a bit over the top, but this is how I imagined they would find the legendary Grand Master Luke Skywalker. Like I said, a bit over the top, but this is what makes the most sense to me. This is the only way for the Force Awakens storyline to conclude in a satisfying way for Luke to really be worth it. And even doing it the way JJ wanted to do this scene before Ryan asked him to change it, having 2 large rocks silently floating behind him. I mean, it's cool, yeah, but it just doesn't feel enough. This relatively small display of the Force is equal to spending an hour trying to find him and absolutely nobody dies because of him. If JJ had ignored Ryan and left the rocks in, it still wouldn't have given enough weight to this scene. That's why I felt I had to make my version so over the top. Luke had to be breathtakingly amazing, doing something that we had never thought was possible, So the struggle to find him felt like it was worth it, for the lives lost not to be sacrifices made in vain. Almost nothing in this scene indicated this was the culmination of every struggle we've seen. From the expression on her face, not showing the awe the scene requires, to them not dollying forward so the camera movement helps give her expression more energy, to not pushing in tight enough to really see Mark Hamill's beautifully subtle performance, this scene was just a complete disgrace compared to what it could have been. Imagine for a moment if The Matrix had ended the same way The Force Awakens ends.
Now get up.
He is the one.
Because of how JJ chose to set up the story.
The map to Skywalker. We know you found it.
That droid has a map that leads straight to Luke Skywalker.
He has a map that leads to Luke Skywalker. He's carrying a map to Luke Skywalker.
A map to Skywalker himself.
Skywalker.
Skywalker. Luke Skywalker.
Skywalker.
Luke.
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 Master Luke. Luke. Master Luke. Luke. Master Luke. Luke.
Because we spend the entire film trying to find the one, you must have the revelation of the one be worth the journey. Number 8. JJ ruined the sequels when he allowed Rian to change his story. Now, according to several sources, as JJ was finishing The Force Awakens and Rian was starting The Last Jedi, Rian realized that Luke couldn't still be connected to the Force while on the island, or he'd have gone to save Han like he did in Episode 5.
Keep the vision out of my head. They're my friends. I gotta help them.
So Rian asked JJ to change the scene and take out the floating boulders so that in Rian's version, Luke could be disconnected from the Force. And JJ agreed to it. This decision had to fly directly in the face of the character arc that JJ had planned for Luke. Seriously, what's their reasoning for having him wear his Jedi robes for 30 years and then only taking them off after Rey shows up? He already had old hobo clothes too, so why was he wearing his Jedi robes when she showed up? This is the point that has me the most confused. Out of every decision JJ made, why in the world would he give up the story he had just spent 2 hours developing? Like we just discussed in point number 7, this scene is absolutely pivotal. It's the point of the entire film, to find Luke Skywalker. And in what condition they find him is vitally important. If they had found him dead, the tone of the entire film is futility. If they find him taking care of his badly wounded students that Kylo had tried to turn and Luke went to save, the tone of the entire film is hope and perseverance. Having Luke meditating with an awesome display of power gives the film a tone of justification. Because he's so powerful, it was worth all of the effort and lives it took to find him. He died because of Luke. He died because of Luke. He died because of Luke. All of these people died because of Luke. All of the dozens or hundreds of people in Maz's castle, they died because of Luke. All of these people died because the First Order was hunting for the map to Luke Skywalker.
Skywalker.
Having Luke be broken completely negates every single sacrifice made in The Force Awakens. By allowing Rian to change this one crucial scene, JJ allowed the entire tone of his film to be altered. Number 9. JJ ruined the sequels when he made awesome new characters irrelevant plot devices. Maz Kanata, Captain Phasma, Supreme Leader Snoke, all of these characters had amazing potential. The character design, the actors playing them, the computer graphics, everything was fantastic. Except for the fact that JJ made every single one of these new characters completely irrelevant. All 3 of these amazing characters can be completely cut out of the story and literally nothing would change. Rey finds the saber without Maz, and nothing Maz says or does changes anything about Rey's character. Now, some may argue that Maz was the one who convinced Rey she didn't need to go back to Jakku, but this is not the case.
I gotta get back to Jakku. I have to get back to Jakku. But I have to get home.
Rey only talked about going back to Jakku before she unlocked her force powers, before she was kidnapped and tied up and mind-raped, before she helped save the galaxy. It was her growing through her struggles that made her realize she didn't need to wait on Jakku anymore, making any advice that Maz gave irrelevant. And the great Supreme Leader Snoke, he does absolutely nothing, has no backstory, no character motivation, no personality beyond generic evil. There's no point to any of his scenes. turning Kylo to the dark side happened before The Force Awakens. In Episode 7, he's just used to add a sinister tone and give little bits of general exposition. Cut him out and what changes? He's only in 3 scenes. In the first one, he makes no decisions. It's Hux who tells him the weapon is ready and it's time to destroy the New Republic. Snoke drops 2 new plot points. Han is Kylo's father, and Kylo is the leader of something called the Knights of Ren. Then Snoke disappears. Cut that entire scene, and what happens? It's still Hux who gives the order to destroy the New Republic, and then we would have an even more impactful reveal of Kylo being Han's son. The reveal of Kylo as Han's son is made in a manner that doesn't at all give weight to how important that information actually is. It's just a throwaway line. Imagine if all we got were extremely vague hints that Kylo knew and hated Han. Then on the bridge, Han tells him to take off his helmet.
What do you think you'll see if I do?
The face of my son.
Now, maybe they didn't want to copy Empire and have the father-son bridge reveal come completely out of nowhere, but let's be real, odds were really good that these new Jedi were the kids of either Luke or Leia, so it's not that big of a shock. And we never even see the Knights of Ren, so that's a completely useless subplot that should never have been introduced, which makes this entire first appearance by Snoke completely useless. And the second scene with Snoke is even more pointless than the first.
The scavenger resisted you.
Snoke acts all shocked that someone could withstand Kylo's mind rape. I assume JJ did this in an effort to show how powerful Kylo supposedly was, except we already saw that. Poe resisted with everything he had, and Kylo still got the information out of him. We don't need Snoke to reiterate, wow, you're so strong in the Force, and she resisted you, wow, she must be super strong. And then Hux reiterates the exact same thing he said last time, that the weapon is ready and it's time to destroy the New Republic. This entire scene should have been cut. And the third and final scene with Snoke, what point does this scene serve? Hux reiterates something we already know yet again, the planet is exploding, and Snoke says, well, that sucks, guess I'd better finish training Kylo. This scene is only 15 seconds long, and is only in the film because they needed a goodbye scene for Snoke's character. But if JJ had just cut Snoke's earlier pointless scenes, this one could have been cut as well. JJ used Snoke as a plot device to introduce menace and a foreboding tone, instead of as an actual character with unique motivations and personality. Now, here is where many people argue, but we didn't know anything about the Emperor after he was introduced in Episode 5. And do you know why not knowing anything about him is completely different from not knowing anything about him? Because this was a sequel intended to finish up the storyline of these 6 films. Because it's already been established that there were only ever 2 Sith. And we heard Palpatine talk about killing his Sith masters, so where could Snoke have come from? They confirmed it wasn't Plagueis, so the only way to introduce a new Sith after Vader and the Emperor die, while staying true to what we've seen in the previous 6 films, is to have one of Luke's students turn to the dark side. Kylo needed to turn to the dark side on his own. Introducing Snoke in the manner that JJ did breaks all Sith lore that we've seen in the previous 6 films. Then there's the completely useless Captain Phasma. She re-gives Kylo's order to kill the villagers, which either makes her look needy or Kylo look incompetent. She catches one of the troopers under her command having a complete panic attack, and then leaves him unsupervised with a loaded gun. She tells Hux that Finn has never acted strangely before, which all of his records are right there on the computer screen. Questioning her now is pointless. Any oddities in his performance she'd have put down in those computer records. And then her final scene is shutting down the force field, which they didn't need her to do anyways. They likely could have kidnapped any random stormtrooper, and he could have told them where the storm generator or shield security room terminal was. Without Phasma, the troopers are commanded by Kylo Ren, nothing changes,
Kill them all.
And they shut down the shields themselves, because seriously, why would Finn ever expect and plan that Phasma would be on Starkiller Base?
The shields. I have an idea about that.
When the last time we saw her, she was on a destroyer orbiting Jakku. Plus, even if the 3 of them couldn't figure out how to use the computer to deactivate the shield, they still had explosives, and we've seen firsthand that Han resorts to explosives before just flipping a switch to turn off shield generators. Han didn't kidnap one of these guys and force them to turn off the shield generator on Endor, he just blew it up. The only reason he didn't stay true to his character and blow up this shield generator room too was so the script could give Phasma another useless scene. Every scene Phasma is in can be taken out and the scene still works, making her character completely pointless.
My friend's got a bag full of explosives. Let's use them.
Even whatever this guy's name actually was, the old guy at the very beginning, his entire dying speech is absolutely pointless. His delivery says unequivocally that Kylo still has good in him, but Kylo murdering him in cold blood without a second thought instantly disproves what the old man just said. He went from having an epic, memorable line to going, LOL, guess I was wrong. RIP. This scene only works if Kylo spends the whole movie unable to actually kill anyone. For this scene to work, we have to see the confused, tormented, very young man who was tempted to the dark side but can't go fully evil because the old man was right, and Ben can't deny his family. Then at the end of the film, when Kylo fully embraces evil and kills his father, the scene comes to completion, with Kylo realizing the old man was right and he can't deny his family. He has to kill them to become the villain he wants to be.
I'm being torn apart.
Cannot deny the truth.
I want to be free of this pain.
I know where you come from. But you cannot deny the truth. That is your family. Your family. I know where you come from. Cannot deny the truth. You cannot deny the truth.
This old man could have set forth an amazing story arc for Kylo Ren, turning from a moody teenager who likes crouching in the shadows pretending he's goth, into an actual villain who's able and willing to kill. But no, the old dude, whatever his name was just another in a long line of throwaway characters with utterly wasted potential. And lastly, point number 10. JJ ruined amazing characters by giving them inconsistent character arcs. First off, we have R2, possibly the most dedicated, independent, successful character in the entire franchise. Leia sends him on a mission by himself, and R2 rises to the call like a champ. When Luke won't take him to find Ben, R2 goes out on his own. When Luke is lost out in the snow, R2 is out there scanning, trying to find him. When Leia needed saving, R2 was there. When 3PO needed saving, R2 was there. R2-D2 was the unstoppable force in every film. The dedication and bravery that he displays is always inspirational, especially when contrasted with 3PO's cowardliness.
Surrender is a perfectly acceptable alternative in extreme circumstances. The Empire
But then, after seeing 6 films of R2 never giving up, JJ Abrams decides to have R2 get depressed and turn himself off because Luke left him behind. R2-D2 would never have done that. R2 would have bravely gone searching for Luke by himself, throwing himself headlong into battles, as we've seen him do time after time. I feel like JJ must have been in a bad spot when he wrote this film. R2 was so depressed he turned himself off. Luke was so depressed he ran away. Han was so depressed he ran away. And speaking of Han, we spent 3 movies watching him slowly transform from an uncaring rogue only out for himself to someone who deeply loves his friends and family. Then a tragedy occurs and Han falls apart and leaves Leia right when she definitely needed him the most. And you know why this is so terrible? Now when I think of Han Solo, this is the first thing I picture. This deadbeat dad who abandoned his wife and his son after the son lost his way. JJ made it abundantly clear that Han and Ben hadn't seen one another since Ben turned to the dark side. Why not? Han Solo never abandoned his friends when they were in danger. This was Han's character arc. He became a man who was willing to rush out into the snow looking for a friend he had only met 3 years ago. But then, when his own son needed him, Han turned and ran away from everything. Yes, people change, tragedy changes people, and relationships do fall apart, sometimes briefly, sometimes for good. But based on his established character arc, Han would never have abandoned Leia, and especially never would have abandoned his son. Then there's Luke's character arc.
I can't keep the vision out of my head. They're my friends, I gotta help them.
Which JJ immediately follows by Luke abandoning his friends.
Luke felt responsible. He just walked away from everything.
I covered earlier how Luke's character arc could have made sense, but just doesn't, since JJ had that arc happen off screen. So let's move on to Maz. She makes a point of saying,
"We must face them. Fight them. All of us.
This would have been the perfect opportunity for JJ to show us a character who is neither a Sith nor a Jedi and how they use the Force in battle. But no, instead we have her claiming they all need to fight together against the First Order, but then disappearing to save her own skin when the First Order actually shows up. And then Ryan had her be just as irrelevant only a few hours later by blatantly refusing to help at all. Maz was quirky and intriguing in all the right ways, but she needed to be around, helping them defeat the First Order, and have a couple I am one with the Force and the Force is with me style moments for her character arc as a wise mentor to fully be realized. Next, we have Finn and Rey, and this section actually ended up being so long, I'm doing a completely separate video on it. In my opinion, these may be the two most wasted characters in film history. It should be finished pretty quickly after this one, so I'll link it at the end of this video. Finally, we have Phasma. This was such an awesome character and played by such a great actress, but with this one scene, JJ completely ruined any potential this character had. She immediately and willingly gives up and takes down the shield, potentially dooming not only herself, but the entire First Order, including everyone under her command. She is portrayed as a dedicated leader in the First Order, and this is not how villains dedicated to a cause act. Ozymandias was willing to die as long as he could prevent nuclear war.
Dad, a world united and at peace, there had to be sacrifice.
Bellatrix Lestrange was definitely willing to die in service of Voldemort. Thanos was willing to sacrifice everything to accomplish his goal.
They're not for him. I ignored my destiny once.
I cannot do that again.
Even for you.
Bane's henchmen were willing to die without question because they believed so deeply in their mission. The operative from Serenity explained how he'd gladly give his life for his cause, and how he doesn't even expect to live in the perfect world that he's fighting for.
I believe in something greater than myself. A better world. A world without sin.
So me and mine gotta lay down and die so you can live in your better world?
I'm not going to live there. There's no place for me there, any more than there is for you. Malcolm, I'm a monster. What I do is evil. I have no illusions about it, but it must be done.
For a villain to be respected, they must be dedicated to their cause. But Phasma is shown to be weak, cowardly, someone who will fold to the slightest threat, and someone who is completely incompetent. Then, as the last mental image we have of her, JJ had them literally throw her away with the rest of the garbage.
What do we do with her? Is there a garbage chute? Trash compactor?
I mean, she was sitting in a computer console and her captors were basically ignoring her. She could have messaged the entire station at once.
You can't be so stupid as to think this will be easy.
And to top it all off, Ryan showed us in episode 8 that Phasma's cool armor is actually laser-proof. She wasn't worried about getting shot, even by the AT-ST. And yet in this scene, she immediately cowed and took down the shields, dooming everyone, just because they were pointing blasters at her that couldn't have hurt her anyways. If they had done this scene right, there would have been a brief battle, and the blasters would have bounced off of her, and she and Chewie would have fought hand-to-hand in an epic battle until he finally overpowered her. His physical strength is the only thing there that was actually a threat to her. This one scene makes her a villain that the audience can no longer fear nor respect. When she showed up again in The Last Jedi, her presence wasn't inspiring or intimidating at all. I honestly expected her to just give up and surrender again for no reason. Because of JJ writing this one scene, Phasma is not inspiring. Because of JJ making her a coward, she cannot inspire fear. Which is ironic since the woman inside the armor is absolutely terrifying. I mean, seriously, how could JJ mess up this character so badly? It's the same actress both times, wearing metal armor both times, who both times is portraying a character who is an elite fighter. In one, she's a fan favorite, and in the other, she's the brunt of the jokes. Like I said earlier, Rian Johnson made a ton of mistakes with The Last Jedi. He did many things that stalled the plot, reverted character development, or just blatantly broke established rules regarding the Force or hyperspace. But nothing he did ruined the franchise as much as JJ Abrams did. JJ Abrams made a story that was so ambiguous that it didn't have a strong foundation to build upon. He took every important plot point and had it happen off-screen so that the sequels felt like they're happening in a completely different universe from the original trilogy. He redefined how the Force works in a way that isn't sustainable for growth, and redefined how hyperspace travel functions. JJ Abrams created an assembly of characters that were so poorly developed that half of them could be written out without the story changing. And he used the Force as a plot device in ways that aren't consistent and make little sense. He gave us a version of our favorite heroes that is a disgrace to their prior achievements. The entire struggle of the original trilogy is completely reversed. Every struggle, sacrifice, and victory was undone, as JJ lost sight of what the heart of the story of Star Wars has always been about. For projects that have to do with suspense and mystery, JJ Abrams is an amazing writer and director. I am honestly excited to see his name attached to films like Cloverfield or shows like Lost or Westworld. But his forte is not in this genre, and he never should have been involved with Star Wars. Actually, the more I research into his other films, JJ may be a terrible storyteller when he's not relying on mystery and suspense. Look at this quote about the JJ Abrams reboot. The original was about competent, intelligent people who worked hard to attain their positions, acted in ways that were consistent with their characters, and the Abrams ones are about people who got their jobs just because, and act in ways that are inconsistent with their characters and situations they experience. Now, this sounds like it's perfectly describing The Force Awakens, but this quote was actually about JJ Abrams' 2009 Star Trek reboot. JJ Abrams has been in charge of rebooting two of the biggest sci-fi franchises of all time, and both films have had many of the same problems with character and plot development. So whoever is calling the shots, whoever at Disney is making sure every Marvel film is turning out so amazing, and is so interconnected with all the other films in the franchise, please get yourself involved with Lucasfilm. Like I said at the end of the last video, the franchise isn't dead. The end of the Skywalker saga was ruined, yes, but Star Wars itself could still have a bright future. The thing is, George Lucas worked on all 6 films to be sure there was a cohesive vision for the entire story. His constant supervision is the reason the prequels fit together with the original trilogy to create a relatively seamless storyline, with all 6 films working towards the same end goals: the rise and the defeat of the Empire, and the fall and rebirth of the Jedi. But Disney never developed a long-term strategy, and it shows, with multiple movies needing multiple director changes and multiple rewrites. Get involved, Disney. George put the future of a galaxy far, far away into your hands, and you've dropped the ball so far. It's time for you to get serious, so pick the pieces back up and get to work gluing them back together. Build us a franchise that we want to remain a part of. And as we wrap up this topic, I again want to point out that everything I've gone over in the past 2 videos are just the biggest problems that I've found with JJ's storyline. The problems I felt created plot holes that would haunt the rest of the franchise. I still have 13 pages filled with smaller problems I could have covered. Things like the huge Grandfather Vader plot hole. Show me again the power of the dark side. What does this mean? Has the ghost of Vader spoken to Kylo? And his ghost reverted to good Anakin. Why would good Anakin be showing Kylo the power of the dark side? Did Anakin somehow fall to the dark side again after becoming a Force ghost? This is extremely important. This is quite possibly the thing that made Kylo turn to the dark side, talking with Vader's ghost. And the fact that it is never explained means that character winds up being underdeveloped. Then we have the incredible idiotic way that JJ ruined the legacy of both Han and Leia's characters. Leia gives Han hope that because he is Ben's father, he can save him when Luke couldn't. But exactly the opposite happened. Han confronted Ben for the first time since he turned, because Leia told Han he could save his son, that there was still good in Ben. Then Ben kills Han, making Leia look like a liar and an idiot, and Han look like a bigger idiot for believing her and getting himself killed. Luke giving himself up to Vader would have been a laughably terrible scene if it hadn't worked. Luke sensed that there was still good in Vader and was proven right, making Luke look intelligent and insightful. Leia clinging to hope that there was good in Ben and then being proven wrong shows that she's unintelligent, uninsightful, too emotionally weak to accept the reality that her baby boy was gone, and now that weakness has made her directly responsible for Han's death. Then there's this terrible dialogue.
She's just beginning to test her powers. The longer it takes to find her, the more dangerous she becomes.
This delivery is intended for the audience, not the stormtrooper. Kylo just walks up to some random guard and starts talking. That trooper should have no idea what girl Kylo is talking about, or what powers Kylo is talking about, and yet he doesn't ask. Kylo also warns him that she's becoming dangerous, but doesn't think to say, oh, by the way, she can kind of mind control you, so watch out for that. So many scenes in this film make no sense when you really look at them. Like, how does the Resistance have full schematics of Starkiller Base? Yes, Finn could provide them with some details, but we had an entire movie dedicated to how difficult it was to steal the original Death Star plans, yet now we're supposed to believe that these plans of a much bigger, much more closely guarded secret battle station were easy to get their hands on?
Many Bothans died to bring us this information.
And it's never explained how Rey could understand droids and Wookiees and whatever this language is. Even Anakin talking with R2, they never show that level of communication, and he grew up around droids.
Can you understand what he's saying? I'm not a protocol droid.
Seriously, let's speed through every scene on Jakku and count the number of droids we see. 2. Unless I missed any in the background, we only see 2 droids on Jakku, and Rey keeps very much to herself. Did she really hang out with either of these droids enough to learn their language? So, how did Rey learn to speak droid? And the only person she ever talks to speaks basic.
Last week there were a half portion each.
What about the droid?
And she spoke basic as a child. So why would she ever have learned to speak whatever this other language is? Just to talk with this one character? What prior character has ever been able to naturally understand every droid or creature they meet?
You can understand that thing?
Even Luke, after spending 30 years with Chewie, still can't understand him, but Rey is instantly translating after likely never meeting a Wookiee in her life.
He said you're coming back with us.
Rey's language skills make absolutely zero sense. Why does BB-8 know exactly where R2 is playing hide-and-seek, but he didn't know that R2 was in power-saving mode waiting for Luke because apparently droids get depression? Then in that same scene, 3PO tells us that R2 doesn't have the rest of the map in his memory, but gotcha! Turns out we could have skipped the entire rest of the movie, because they already had both pieces of the map right here. JJ used 3PO to blatantly lie to the audience, just so R2 could have his pointless dramatic reveal at the end. And what about Lando and Mon Mothma? He quickly became one of the gang, one of the featured main characters in episodes 5 and 6. But then it's like all memory of him was erased. He's not even mentioned once in episodes 7 or 8. And Mon Mothma founded and ran the rebellion. She would have been instrumental in forming the New Republic, yet no mention of her either? Or this scene.
Why are we here again? Get your droid on a clean ship.
Clean?
You think it was luck that Chewie and I found the Falcon? If we can find it on our scanners, the First Order's not far behind.
What does this mean? Is the Falcon now permanently tracked by the First Order? And if it is, why are they still able to fly it later? And just because the First Order may have seen the Falcon the same time Han and Chewie did, they're long gone. The only way this scene makes sense is if the First Order has some kind of unexplainable magic hyperspace tracking machine.
Wait. They've tracked us through light speed.
Oh. Well, I guess we can't blame Ryan for that mistake. It seems like JJ was actually the one who introduced the idea that the First Order can track ships without needing to have a homing beacon attached. In episode 5, they barely got out ahead of Vader, and yet Han wasn't talking about getting a clean ship so they wouldn't get tracked down. This scene makes no sense unless Han knows about hyperspace tracking, which I really don't think is something JJ was intending to say with this scene. Then we have 3PO's red arm. This is mentioned 3 different times in the script.
You probably don't recognize me because of the red arm.
No mention of important things like why Ben turned, how someone as powerful as Snoke was unknown to Sidious. No, instead we get multiple lines about 3PO having a red arm.
Yes, I must get my proper arm reinstalled.
Which, by the way, 4 years later, I don't know anyone who knows the backstory to this. Every time I see this scene, I'm just left feeling confused and wondering which movie is going to finally explain it. And why did Starkiller Base have to be so enormous? The Death Star was a fraction of the size and could already blow up a planet. In the same time and cost it took to build one Starkiller Base, what if they could have built an entire fleet of Death Stars for the same cost? It's like JJ was purposefully pointing out that the bad guys never learn from their mistakes, and they intentionally keep building bigger and bigger structures that a single fighter is still able to destroy. And it sucked up the sun. How does it ever fire again? Or can the planet somehow move? And where are the planet-sized engines needed if it is able to move? And how does the planet not completely freeze once the sun goes out? And how is the whole planet covered in snow when it's so close to the sun? Everything should be on fire. Or we could look at how the Rathtar scene seems so completely out of place. This plays out like a slapstick comedy smashed together with an alien creature horror film.
This was a mistake! Huge!
These things are way scarier than any alien we've ever seen. I'd even put them on a whole nother level above the Rancor. The design of these tentacled teeth testes is terrifying enough, but then add in the fact that they're apparently ravenously hungry and eat people whole, and suddenly the extremely forced humor isn't nearly enough to lighten up what turned out to be way too dark of a scene. Then to make the whole scene even worse, the Kenja Club Pirates were played by Indonesian action stars Iko Uwais, Yayan Ruan, and Sirep Arif Rahman. These guys are amazing action stars that can do stuff like this. And this is what JJ Abrams had them do in The Force Awakens. Man, it's good to see JJ fully utilizing an actor's potential. And what about the fact that JJ couldn't seem to decide who the main protagonist was? Kylo spends all his time focusing on Rey, then all of a sudden he's all about Finn? Watch who the camera focuses on, who's centered in the frame. That's how filmmakers show who a character is looking at without him needing to say her name or say, "I'm looking at Rey." Shots like this are subconsciously confusing to the audience, because the framing of the shot shows us who is the most important. And undoubtedly, the two most important people in these scenes are Rey and Kylo. She's the one who screamed. She's the one who's been Kylo's nemesis, so why is Finn the one Kylo suddenly focuses on? Like Rey standing a step above Finn here subconsciously lets us see that she has the moral high ground.
I'm not a hero.
What are you doing here?
We came back for you.
What'd he say?
That it was your idea.
The positioning of the actors in each frame is very important to conveying the right message, and the way JJ directed some of these scenes just feels off. And one of my most hated moments ever, when Chewbacca walks directly past Leia, ignoring her after Han was killed. Now, JJ even came out and addressed this, saying, "Had Chewbacca not been where he was, you probably wouldn't have thought of it. But because he was right there, passed by Leia, it felt almost like a slight, which was definitely not the intention." But this only proves my point. JJ was literally there. He saw firsthand when Chewie walked past Leia, and his immediate reaction wasn't, "Oh crap, that would never happen." He wasn't thinking about what the character would do. He was thinking, "I need to get Finn from point A to point B, and might as well have Chewie carry him." Now, yes, I know I'm nitpicking. Many of these quote-unquote problems don't really matter. But that's exactly my point. These things didn't matter to JJ when he made this movie. Every one of these problems would have been easy to address if the people in charge had cared. This isn't about liking or not liking the film. I actually really enjoyed The Force Awakens. But it could have so easily been better. I've now listed 22 critical problems with this story, and it only took me about 100 hours to research, write, and edit these 2 videos. I found 22 enormous problems with the script in just 100 hours, whereas JJ had months of pre-production writing the script. Working a 40-hour workday for, let's say, 3 months of writing, he would have put in 480 hours. He probably put in 300 more hours looking at the script than I did. Plus, he wasn't the only writer, and none of these people made the effort to look closely enough to see these problems I've listed. But that's okay. Maybe he didn't notice any of the big things, but at least he thought to add in this big doggo clenching its butt cheeks when Finn runs past. Just let that sink in. We have small details, like alien animal clenching butt cheeks, but we don't know why Kylo turned, what he and Vader talked about, where Snoke came from. JJ didn't show us anything that matters, but I guess maybe different things matter to different people. Thanks for watching, everyone. Be sure to subscribe. I'll see you next time.